and only the BBC in England, and they would play it. We would know when they'd play it. It would be like 9-4.
For over 6 decades, Ringo Starr has been the heartbeat of the Beatles, the quiet, steady presence behind the drums, the glue that held together the chaos of genius. While Lennon and McCartney wrote the songs and George sought spiritual peace, Ringo was the grounding force, humble, kind, and loyal through it all. He never needed the spotlight. He just wanted the band to stay together. But even the man who brought rhythm and laughter to millions couldn't escape the passing of time, or the pain that comes with watching the world he built slowly fade away. Today, news surrounding Ringo Starr has left fans across the globe in tears. It's not about fame, fortune, or another musical milestone. It's about love, loss, and the harsh reminder that even legends must face life's most fragile truths. Those who know Ringo best describe him as deeply private, but behind that famous grin lies a man who has endured more heartache than most realize. From the devastating losses of his bandmates to his own quiet health battles, Ringo's journey has always been one of survival, of choosing light even in the darkest moments. Now, as he faces this latest heartbreaking chapter, fans are reflecting on his extraordinary life, from Liverpool's gritty streets to the world's grandest stages, and wondering how much more the last Beatle standing can endure. The news isn't just tragic. It's a reminder of the cost of time, fame, and the enduring loneliness that comes when you've outlived your band, your era, and perhaps your peace. Long before he was Ringo Starr, the world-famous drummer of the Beatles, he was Richard Starkey, a frail boy from the working-class streets of Liverpool, England. Born in 1940, Ringo's early life was marked not by music, but by illness and struggle. At the age of 6, he suffered a ruptured appendix that left him hospitalized for months. Later, a bout of tuberculosis would confine him to a sanatorium for nearly 2 years. It was there, surrounded by silence and sickness, that he first found rhythm, tapping on the hospital bed rails with anything he could find. He often said that music was the one thing that made him feel alive during those long, lonely years. By the time he returned home, he had already decided he wouldn't just live, he'd play. Liverpool in the 1950s was a city of hard work and harder lives, but something was changing. The docks echoed with American rock and roll, and young boys with guitars and dreams began forming bands. Ringo started with a local group called Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, known for their energy and showmanship. He wasn't just a drummer, he was a performer. With his easy grin, unique drumming style, and the habit of twirling his sticks mid-song, he became a local favorite. Then came the call that would change everything. In 1962, a scrappy young band named the Beatles needed a new drummer. Pete Best was out, and the group, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison, wanted someone steadier, someone who could keep up with their new sound. They'd seen Ringo play around Liverpool and Hamburg. They knew instantly he was the missing piece. The chemistry was immediate. When Ringo took his place behind the kit at the Cavern Club, the crowd erupted. Lennon later said, "That was the moment the Beatles became the Beatles." His simple, precise drumming gave the band its heartbeat. Never flashy, always perfect for the song. In the years that followed, Ringo went from the small clubs of Liverpool to the global stage. When Beatlemania exploded, he was often the most beloved Beatle. Fans adored his humor, his humility, and his shy charm. While others chased fame, Ringo kept the band grounded. He was the steady hand in a whirlwind of egos, expectations, and global hysteria. But even then, the cracks were forming. As Lennon and McCartney grew into songwriting powerhouses and George fought for his creative space, Ringo often felt left behind. He once confessed, "There were days I thought, maybe they don't need me anymore." Yet when tensions boiled within the band, Ringo became the peacemaker, the quiet voice urging unity when everything threatened to fall apart. His calmness, his humor, and his genuine heart made him the soul of the Beatles. By the late 1960s, though, the strain was undeniable. The music was evolving, and so were the men behind it. Ringo walked out during the recording of the White Album, leaving a note behind for his bandmates that simply read, "I feel unloved, and I'm leaving." He returned after a few weeks, welcomed back with flowers on his drum kit, a symbol of just how much he meant to the band. What few knew it The time was that this moment foreshadowed a lifetime of emotional challenges for Ringo. The fame that once saved him would become a burden. And as the years passed, he'd face heartbreaks that no amount of music could heal. When the Beatles officially disbanded in 1970, it felt as though the world had lost its heartbeat. Fans were devastated, critics were shocked, and even the band members themselves struggled to process it. For Ringo Starr, the split was more than just the end of a band. It was the end of a family. He had spent nearly a decade living, traveling, and performing with three men who were like brothers to him. Together, they had gone from cramped clubs to stadiums filled with screaming fans, from Liverpool's gritty streets to the world's brightest stages. But behind the fame, the tension had been simmering for years. Artistic differences, business disputes, and personal struggles had quietly pulled them apart. When it was over, Ringo felt empty. "It was like the ground disappeared beneath me," he once said. "One minute, you're part of the biggest thing in the world. The next, it's all gone." While Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison dove headfirst into solo projects, Ringo found himself lost in the silence. He released albums of his own, even scoring hits like It Don't Come Easy and Photograph, but the joy wasn't the same. The magic of the Beatles couldn't be recreated. There were moments when he'd look around the studio and feel the ghosts of the past. John's laughter, Paul's harmonies, George's quiet wit. He masked the loneliness with humor. In interviews, Ringo was always upbeat, cracking jokes, flashing his signature peace sign. But close friends knew the truth. Ringo was hurting, one recalled. He missed the band more than anyone. It was his family. As the years went on, tragedy deepened the loneliness. Ringo struggled with the pressures of fame and the emptiness that followed the band's breakup. Alcohol and self-doubt crept into his life, slowly clouding the joy that had once defined him. He would later admit that the 1970s and early 1980s were some of the darkest years of his life. Still, Ringo refused to give up. He threw himself into projects that brought him closer to his fans. Ringo's all-star band became a celebration of music and friendship, uniting artists from different generations. It was his way of keeping the spirit of unity alive, even if the Beatles could never be reborn. But then came the blows no one could prepare for. In 1980, John Lennon was murdered outside his New York apartment. Ringo, devastated, flew to New York the very next day to comfort Yoko Ono and Sean. "I couldn't believe it," he said years later, tears filling his eyes. "I just wanted to be there. I had to see them." That loss shattered something inside him. For months, Ringo avoided interviews and public appearances. He would later say that Lennon's death made him realize how fragile everything truly was. "It hit me. We'll never all be together again," he said quietly. Then, in 2001, another heartbreak came when George Harrison lost his battle with cancer. "We were brothers," Ringo whispered in an interview. "Losing George, it broke my heart all over again." By that time, only two Beatles remained, Ringo and Paul. The weight of being the last ones left haunted him in ways few could understand. Every song he played, every fan he met, was a reminder of what once was and could never be again. Ringo continued to spread peace and love, not as a slogan, but as a way to survive the grief. Yet deep down, the loneliness lingered. He had been the drummer for the greatest band in history, but when the music stopped, he was just a man trying to make sense of the silence. Ringo Starr was known to millions as the happy, peace-loving Beatle, the drummer with the easy smile and infectious laugh. But behind the trademark grin, few knew the pain, loss, and personal battles that shaped his life after fame. When the Beatles ended, Ringo didn't just lose a band. He lost the sense of identity that had carried him through the whirlwind of the 1960s. For years, his life had been consumed by tours, interviews, and studio sessions. Suddenly, the silence that followed was deafening. He once admitted, "I didn't know who I was without them." "I was Ringo Starr of the Beatles, not just Ringo." The pressure of being a global icon weighed heavily on him. Wherever he went, fans expected the same cheerful, witty personality they saw on screen. But behind closed doors, Ringo battled loneliness and addiction. By the late 1970s, his drinking had spiraled out of control. I was lost, he confessed. I had everything: fame, money, fans. But inside, I was empty. There were nights when he wouldn't even remember recording sessions or performances. Friends began to worry, seeing the toll it took on his health and relationships. His marriage to actress Maureen Starkey, already strained by years of fame and absence, began to crumble. By 1975, the couple divorced, a painful ending to a relationship that had once been filled with love and laughter. For a while, Ringo tried to fill the void with work. He acted in films, recorded albums, and toured with fellow musicians. But none of it seemed to cure the ache within. When the curtain falls and the fans go home, you're left with yourself, he said. And that's the hardest part. The 1980s brought both tragedy and awakening. The murder of John Lennon struck him deeply, a loss that reignited every pain he had buried. It reminded him how fragile life truly was. Ringo began to reevaluate everything: his choices, his habits, and his purpose. I knew I couldn't keep living that way, he said. John's death woke me up. In 1981, fate intervened in the form of actress Barbara Bach. The two met while filming the movie Caveman, and what began as a light-hearted friendship quickly turned into a deep connection. Barbara saw through the fame and bravado. She saw the man beneath, the one still searching for peace. But even love couldn't immediately heal his struggles. Both Ringo and Barbara battled addiction together, often enabling each other's habits in the early years. By the late 1980s, they reached a breaking point. After one particularly frightening incident, Ringo realized he couldn't go on like this. We were destroying ourselves, he admitted. We had everything to live for, but we were throwing it away. In 1988, Ringo and Barbara checked into rehab together, a decision that changed both their lives forever. It was the hardest thing I ever did, Ringo later said, but it was also the best. From that point on, Ringo turned his pain into purpose. He embraced sobriety and began to speak openly about the importance of healing and self-love. The once-lost Beatle found a new rhythm in life, one guided not by fame, but by peace, gratitude, and spiritual strength. He poured that energy into his music and message. Through his all-star band, Ringo created a space for artists from all generations to come together and celebrate music without ego or rivalry. It was his way of keeping the joy alive, a second chance at unity. Despite the scars, Ringo never lost his belief in love. You can't change the past, he said, but you can live today with peace and kindness. The world may remember him as the drummer of the Beatles, but the real Ringo Starr, the man who faced addiction, heartbreak and loss, emerged stronger than ever. Behind the smile was a survivor who refused to let darkness define his story. As Ringo Starr entered his later years, the world began to look at him not just as a rock legend, but as a symbol of endurance, hope, and simple human kindness. Through decades of fame, heartbreak, and redemption, Ringo had found what many of his peers never could: peace within himself. In interviews, his message remained beautifully consistent: peace and love. That's all you need. Those weren't just empty words or a nostalgic nod to the 1960s. For Ringo, they became the philosophy that defined his entire life. Every July 7th on his birthday, he encouraged fans around the world to pause and say peace and love at noon, a ritual that grew from a personal wish into a global movement. People think it's just a slogan, he once explained, but it's real to me. The world's too angry, too divided. Peace and love is how we start healing. In his 80s, Ringo showed no signs of slowing down. While most of his contemporaries retired long ago, he continued to record albums, tour with his all-star band, and share joy through music. On stage, his energy remained electric. Fans who attended his shows often described a feeling of warmth, as if they were watching not just a rock star, but an old friend spreading happiness. Still, Ringo was never one to hide from the realities of aging. He spoke candidly about health challenges, the loss of close friends, and the growing realization that time was precious. I've had a long, beautiful life, he said, but you don't know how long you've got. So every day I wake up thankful. He often reflected on the band that made him a household name. I still miss the boys, he admitted. John, George. They're with me every time I play. When asked about Paul McCartney, his last surviving Beatle brother, Ringo's face would light up. "We've shared something no one else can understand," he said. "We're family. Always will be." Over the years, Ringo also became a passionate advocate for mental health and recovery. He spoke openly about his struggles with addiction, hoping that his honesty might inspire others to seek help. "There's no shame in saying you need help," he said. "What's shameful is pretending you don't." His marriage to Barbara Bach remained one of the strongest in show business, a testament to love's power to heal and endure. "She saved my life," Ringo often said. "We saved each other." Together, they built a life away from the chaos of Hollywood, focusing on charity, mindfulness, and quiet joy. Even as he aged, Ringo never lost his humor. When asked how he managed to stay so youthful, he joked, "It's all the broccoli and meditation, man." But underneath the laughter was a deeper truth, a man who had learned to let go of bitterness and live in gratitude. In 2024, Ringo released what many considered his final major project, a reflective collection of songs that blended nostalgia with hope. Critics praised it as a heartfelt goodbye, filled with warmth and wisdom. "It's not about endings," Ringo said. "It's about carrying the love forward." Fans across generations continue to look up to him, not just as the drummer of the Beatles, but as a living example of resilience. From hospital beds in Liverpool to the heights of global fame, from addiction to redemption, Ringo Starr's journey remains one of the most inspiring stories in music history. And though the world knows that time will eventually claim even its brightest stars, Ringo's message continues to echo louder than ever. Peace and love. That's all I want. All I ever wanted. If the world remembers me for that, then I've done my job. In the end, Ringo Starr's greatest legacy wasn't his drumming or his fame. It was his unwavering belief that kindness can change the world, one smile, one beat, and one message of peace at a time.